I'm back with the last of the core faction updates. What has changed for the Dwarves in 1.5 post FAQ? This video is brought to you by the TSN Arena, the #1 place to go for Old World and Age of Sigmar tournaments here in Nottingham. Rob runs a wide range of events, from 500 point forays all the way up to 2,600 point mega battles, where single models like dragons have a less pronounced effect on the game and you see bigger bricks of infantry. Of course, there's still the normal 2,000 point battles, but even in there there's some room for experimentation, with fan favourite events like the river battles going incredibly quickly. The TSN Arena is located on the outskirts of Nottingham City Centre near the Motorpoint Arena, and it is conveniently located in the middle of plenty of parking spots within walking distance of multiple hotels and two great places to go for food, including Sneinton Market, which has a wide range of options. So, if you're interested in going to a venue where there's plenty of table space, the comfiest chairs that I've been in at any venue, and free drinks all weekend, go to www.tsnarena.com to buy your tickets today. Link in the description. As always, let's start off with the specific changes in the Forces of Fantasy errata for Dwarves. And I think this is the faction that's had the most specific changes compared to generic changes. Obviously, the infantry changes make a difference to Dwarves, and we'll talk about that as we get on. But I think the actual specific changes are the most impactful here compared to any other army. So, to start off, there are a lot of changes for the Anvil of Doom, and we'll have a look at what that actually means in a second. First of all, strike the runes. Change the rule as follows. An Anvil of Doom casts at bound spell level 2 instead of bound spell level 3, which it was previously. This is obviously a nerf in terms of its effectiveness to cast spells, but it's balanced out by the fact that everyone else is getting a bit worse at casting. So you're going from +3 to +2, everyone else is going from +4 to +2. So it is a nerf, but it's not too bad. However, the next two, the Rune of Oath and Steel and the Rune of Hearth and Home, have been changed from casting on 7s to casting on 8s. This, again, is likely to do with how all of the rest of the magic has changed, but it does feel pretty punishing. So let's have a quick look at those two spells and whether you'd still think about taking the Anvil. So, obviously this is the pre-rework or pre-1.5 FAQ numbers, so this power level 3 is actually power level 2, and this 7 here and this 7 here have become 8. So, why have they changed? Well, Rune of Oath and Steel, if we combo that with a parry save, that we'll talk about more in detail later on, parry save giving you +1 to your armor if you've got hand, weapon, and shield in combat, so an additional +1. This would mean that you would have a 3-up rerollable armor save on just very cheap core units, or cheap for dwarves, and I think in that world, going from casting it on a 7 to casting it on an 8 is not unreasonable. If you compare it to the other defensive boosts that the other armies can take, getting to cast this on a 6 on the dice is pretty consistent, and it's still, it's a really strong effect. You're getting your dwarf warriors with hand, weapon, shield, for example, up to a 3-up rerollable. You're probably never getting it off on the 11+, but that's less important because you've got the parry save. You've got that boost, which gets you up to a 3-up armor save anyway, so you're already a lot tankier than you were. So with that in mind, this going to an 8 feels okay. It's a little bit of a shame given that it's a double nerf. You go from, basically, you needed a 4 to cast it before, and now you need a 6, so that's a big decrease in consistency. But if you look at it in terms of the changes to magic for all armies, I'd say it's pretty in line, if not, still maybe a little bit too generous in terms of what it gives. Then we've got the Rune of Hearth and Home, and this going from a 7 to an 8 doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So again, this goes from you used to have to cast it on a 4, and now you have to cast it on a 6. It gives all friendly dwarf units within 21 inches immune to psychology, and that's fine, but I don't love it. So immune to psychology is okay. It gives you, you can't flee, not the dwarves flee very often, but it is nice to have that option. It also gives you immune to, fear, terror, panic. You can take a rune that gives your key units immune to fear and terror. I don't know that this is super necessary, and yes, if you could cast this without, any sort of penalty or restriction, it would be great. But you can only cast 1 bound spell per phase, so you want to go for the actual good one here, the Rune of Oath and Steel. So this being nerfed, I think, feels a little bit odd to me, because I see you more likely to use the Rune of Oath and Steel if you're taking an Anvil still, which you might not take. Then if we have a quick look at the other two, Rune of Haste and Urgency, this was already inconsistent previously when you had to roll a 7. Now you have to roll an 8. It's just very hard to get this off. And this is the double move, which obviously, as has been coined on the internet, the Richer Yeet, where you put a unit in marching column and then just fire them up the board so that they're right in front of your opponent. This is now only happening if you roll an 8, so you're getting it off less than 50% of the time, and I don't like making that part of my game plan when it's so inconsistent. And then finally, you've got the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, which is a magic missile, cast on 9, so you need a 7, 27-inch range, 2d6 strength, 4 hits at AP2. This is still good, in my opinion. Magic missiles have got worse across the board, harder to cast. Magic resist is more, more seen, which we'll talk about that as well. But in this case, I think this is still a very good magic missile, and it's the only thing that you'd be wanting to cast in this phase, so you can get it off without too much issue. So if you do want to take it, and we'll get to the other reason you might not want to take an anvil in a second, but I think there's still play to take one with Rune of Oath and Steel to make your units more tanky, or a key unit, and then also the Rune of Wrath and Ruin. I'm probably never casting Hearth and Home, and I think Haste and Urgency is... It's nice to have in your back pocket, but don't plan on it. Just, if you get it off, it's great. If you don't get it off, it's not. So you're probably not doing marching column shenanigans, because you're more likely than not to not get the second cast off, and then you're just stuck in marching column out in no man's land. Back to the PDF of changes. We've got hammerers get... in fact, no, let's go to the... We'll skip ahead slightly, because I think it's worth just looking at this one in context of the anvil. If I give armor runes to an Anvil of Doom, does the anvil itself benefit, or just the crew? Previously, it would affect the anvil as well, but now you can't put any runes on the anvil itself, which is a real blow to its survivability. If we have a quick look at what the actual tankiness of the anvil is, it's not that tanky. It is a war machine. T7, 5 wounds with a 5 at ward save, so... It doesn't immediately fall over, but it is easier to kill. Previously, you'd see people put immune to multiple wounds on there, so it can't just be cannoned out. It is very vulnerable to a couple of cannon shots. Or strength 10, toughness 10, sorry. I wasn't a huge fan of making it T10. It felt a little bit overkill for how many points it was. But there was a lot of stuff that you could stack on it, and now, obviously... That's not something that you can play around with. It does have magic resist, so it's probably not going to die to magic missiles, but we're seeing a lot of cannons in the meta at the moment, so I think it's a little risky to play an anvil, and if you do take it, I think you're more likely to put it behind some terrain. You're trying to keep it safe, so you're maybe not getting value out of the magic missile part of it as well. Back to the other changes, hammerers gain Gromrel armor, which is really nice because hammerers do come with shields or the ability to get shields, and that means that they can have, if they want to, they can go hand, weapon, and shield, get that 3-up armor save. With the Gromrel armor, they re-roll their failed rolls of a 1. So if you roll 1s, you get to re-roll the armor save. Just make them a lot more tanky. Obviously, with hammerers, you're trying to lean into the, I want you to charge me, I want to get more attacks, and then hit you with the hammers. But it is nice to have that backup plan, whether, even if it's just you've got a unit champion that you want to soak a charge into, a dragon or something like that, and you want them to have the additional tankiness and make them slightly less likely to fall over and give combat res. So, nice little change here, good to have. Next page, on the Iron Breakers, Runes of Protection. Change the following rune wording to have a 6 of ward save against any wounds that were caused by a non-magical enemy attack. This change is just to bring all of the units in line, where there's something that previously would have applied to a character, or it was unclear whether it would have applied to the character because it says models in this unit. Now it specifically says models with this special rule have a 6 of ward save. This is fine, it just clarifies that it doesn't bestow a ward save onto any characters joined. It's not a great ward save, so you weren't leaning on that anyway. And also, you're probably not going to be taking Iron Breakers because of the changes to parry and other models getting up to that level of tankiness. So this is a change that just clarifies things, not a huge deal. Speaking of huge deals, though, Trollhammer Torpedoes is massive. Previously, this was a Strength 8 Dwarf crafted weapon. So that was a really good weapon to have. Now you've gone from Strength 8 to Strength 5, and you've gained Cumbersome, which is a huge nerf. Really unfortunate for the Trollhammer Torpedo. It's probably dead, I think. I still like the Iron Drakes, but I'm probably not bothering to put a Trollhammer Torpedo on. I'm just going for more of the regular Drake guns, which are, pretty decent, especially at chewing through infantry and cavalry, which we're seeing a lot more in the meta of, compared to the big ridden monsters or, other big beasties we were expecting to see previously. In terms of changes, it's certainly not all nerfs. There are some real nice changes here, and the first one is your defensive ability against magic, and there's a few things that we'll talk about more when we get to the actual list building, but we'll start off here with Rune Law. So basically it just clarifies that you dispel as if you're a wizard, even though you are. So you dispel with a +3 if you're an Anvil of Doom at 24 inches. This is the same as it was before. However, everyone else has got worse. So you keeping your +3 to dispel is really strong. And it's one of the big reasons I think you might want to keep running an Anvil Doom if you're worried about, having the best defense against magic. We've also got the Rune Lord, which has got a dispel range of 21 and +2 to dispel. That's really nice. Previously, they were a level 2 wizard, so they only had an 18-inch range to dispel, and we're keeping the +2 to dispel. And then the Runesmith is an 18-inch range and +1 modifier to dispel. So this is the same as it was. So basically, the Anvil is the same as it was previously, but that is stronger now, given that everyone else has got worse. The Runesmith is the same as before, and again, comparably, it's better than it was. But in the middle, the Rune Lord has gained 3 inches of dispel range, and it's still dispelling at +2, which is equivalent to as high as a level 4 wizard. So this is really nice, and stacked with the inherent magic resist that these models bring, is a really good set of magic defensive tools. Quick note that I realised I didn't talk about, I'm recording this after the rest of the video, so I'll slip it in somewhere, but the fighting rank. So this has changed. Now, obviously, you do have 2 ranks that can fight when you have been charged, or when you haven't charged, if you're an infantry unit, which is basically all dwarves. But this is one of the armies that really does suffer from the fighting rank change, and you have to think about how you're going to deploy your units, how wide you want to go. Any model within a fighting rank and within a number of inches equal to its movement, the enemy unit can fight. This represents the model closing in on the foe. That means, because you've only got a 3-inch movement, if you're not in base-to-base contact with the enemy, you have to be within 3 inches of the enemy model to fight. What does that mean in terms of actual base to base? So if you have a unit that's, let's say, 100 wide, let's just say for the sake of this you've gone super wide, and you have a model that is corner to corner with your 25mm base. From that 25mm you measure 3 inches each direction, so you can see how far you go. Because an inch is slightly more than 25mm, you have 4 models in range that can fight in the front rank, and I think it would be 3 models in the back rank that would be able to fight. So you're still getting some decent width outside. It's theoretically 4 models worth of fighting on either side that's not in base to base, but you've just got to remember that there is actual restriction to what you can do. You can't just go really, really wide. So gun lines do suffer a little bit with this rule. Makes it a bit harder to run big units of guns that also double up as fighting units. So what are the changes summarized? Well, if we go through, obviously we've got the casting changes. For a start, this doesn't really affect dwarves as much, but everyone else goes from +2, +4 to cast for a level 2, level 4 wizard to +1, +2 to cast. So your top level wizard is probably only getting a +2 to cast unless you've got other bonuses, which means dwarves are much better at actually stopping that magic. Great stuff there. Anvil casts at +2. This is a nerf from the numbers you were at before, but it's a buff overall, because previously you were casting worse than level 4 wizards, the top level wizards other people can play. Now that you're casting at the same level as everyone else. So comparatively a buff, I would say, in terms of that Anvil change. Oath and Steel and Hearth and Home, those are the 2 things that have been changed in terms of their casting value has gone from a 7 to an 8. Again, this is a nerf, but I'm still pretty happy to cast Oath and Steel. I'm never casting Hearth and Home. The Anvil, 24-inch dispel, Rune Lord 21, and the Runesmith 18-inch dispel range, with their comparable, +3, +2, +1 in terms of the dispel threat there. So this is, I would say, just a really big buff to your defensive ability, and there are some runes that we can look at later on that make that even better. And, of course, widespread magic resist. Let's talk about magic resist. Previously, if you were against, say, a level 4 wizard, which is what everyone was bringing, and they cast a fireball at you, the fireball goes off on an 8, so they needed to roll a 4 on the dice. Well, now they needed to roll a 5 on the dice, which means that they were, if you had magic resist 1, you were almost always still going to get that off. It didn't make a noticeable difference, and your cat dispelling, you were probably only bringing a bit of Runesmith, so you're either doing a fated dispel or you're dispelling at +1. Fireball was going to hit you, Fireball was going to do some damage. It's not the best spell to kill dwarves, but, it was going to get through realistically. Now, for example, if we look at a Fireball cast from a level 3 wizard, which is going to be sort of the standard for a lot of armies, they need to roll a 7 to get that spell off. Going from a 5 to a 7 is a really big difference, and you've got much more chance of dispelling it because you've got much better range on your dispel threats. You might take Rune Lords now, whereas previously they didn't have a purpose. Rune Lords themselves are magic resist too, or Runesmiths as well. So you can stack the defenses into this army very comfortably, and depending on which of the factions within Dwarves you're playing, there are actual benefits to running these characters without just being like, oh, this is my magic defense. You can take a Runesmith Battle Standard Bearer that still gives, you know, magic resist 2. It's still a level 1 wizard in terms of dispelling enemy spellcasts. So I really like the changes there in terms of Dwarves' ability to, you know, have spells bounce off them, stacked up with some of the choices they can take as well. Hammerers get Grummel Armor, and Ironbreakers get their Rune of Protection clarified. Talked about these already. It's a nice change for Hammerers, but Hammerers aren't core, so I'm still on the fence about how much I like them. Ironbreakers Rune of Protection just clarifies that we can't get bonuses to, you know, bonuses to any characters that have joined them, but you're probably not taking Ironbreakers now anyway. Trollhammer Torpedoes put into the ground, just absolutely murdered. It was better or comparable to a cannon cast, you know, that Dwarves had, and now it's just not. So rest in peace, Trollhammer Torpedo, but Iron Drakes are still probably pretty decent. And then the Anvil's armor runes as well. So just in terms of you can't buff up the Anvil in the way that you could before, making it a lot easier to pick it off at range. And the thing that really worries me here is the ability to just snipe it with cannons. Yes, it's got 5 wounds. Yes, it's got a 5-up save. But that means on average you only need to hit it with 3 Empire or Cathay cannons, and both of those armies can do that turn 1 pretty comfortably. So if you're bringing one of the, you know, if you're bringing an Anvil, you've got to make sure that you've put it in a good spot. You don't want to risk losing it too easily. Also challenge changes. Dwarves were one of the factions that could go toe-to-toe with the dragon, and not only win on combat res, maybe sometimes spike and beat them in terms of just the really hard-to-kill Dwarf King with the Rune of Smiting could do a whole load of damage to them. So they were already pretty fine taking a Dwarf charge to the front. They didn't love it, but it wasn't the end of the world. Now every unit can take a dragon charge to the front, which is incredible. So challenge changes really nice, makes it a lot harder for people to actually get in and crack dwarves. Okay. And obviously we can't talk about dwarves without the changes to infantry. We'll just go through these quickly because at this point I'm sure you know all of the sort of base infantry changes, but we'll talk about them and then very quickly contextualize them as well. So press a battle, master infantry, parry. These are the 3 big changes that every infantry model in the game that is regular or heavy infantry gets. Press of battle means that you get an additional rank of models that fight. Obviously, incredible stuff there. So as long as you're not charging or pursuing, because pursue counts as a charge move, you'll be fighting with 2 ranks instead of 3. Or if you've gone with the Imperial Dwarves, I think they can have spears as well. You could theoretically have 3 ranks of attacks. But, you know, you're looking at only, you know, you're looking at 2 ranks of dwarves when you charge, and you're going to get charged a lot more than you're going to be charging because you're really, really slow and you're not doing the Richie Yeet as much. So that's a change there that's worth remembering. Massed infantry. If you outnumber your opponent and you're an infantry unit, you get +1 to your combat res. Keep in mind that this is unit strength, it's not models. So how does this help? Single models really cannot just charge you in the front because you're going to be getting a lot more combat res. If you're playing against stuff like Skaven, goblins, anything that's very numerous, you're probably not going to get the master infantry +1, but you're going to be getting it as long as people are bringing units of cavalry against you, or chariots, or, you know, single models or smaller units, lower unit strength. Parry as well, this is a really big one for dwarves in my opinion. Hand weapon and shield, if you've got that, gives you an additional +1 to your armor save in combat. So things that were heavy armor, hand weapon, shield go from a 4-up save in combat to a 3-up save in combat. It is capped at a 3-up save, which is why I'd say you're probably not going to see Ironbreakers anymore. They've got full plate, they've got hand weapon, they've got shield. They haven't got any other weapons that they can swap to, so their +1 to their armor save is just kind of wasted. They're just rocking around with a 3-up save like everyone else that's paying less points for it. That's not great. I would say you probably just go to Longbeards and have a very similar effect. Obviously, Ironbreakers are better against enemy shooting. You don't get the parry save outside of combat, but I just don't see a huge place for Ironbreakers now. So parry save gets your warriors, your Royal Clan warriors, your Longbeards, your Hammerers, anyone who's going to use heavy armor, hand weapon and shield, gets them up to a 3-up save when you need it in combat. Then we've got weapon selection, and I really like the weapon selection changes here. So what does that do for you? Well, previously, when you selected a weapon on the turn that you started combat, whether you were charged or you charged, you would pick a weapon and you had to use that throughout the rest of the combat, unless it was something like Lances, where you could only use it for the first round of combat. That has now changed, and at step 1.1, when you select the unit and you do all your challenges, you also choose what weapon you want to use for the rest of the the rest of the turn, not the rest of the combat. So you can take a charge with a unit of Longbeards, for example, stand there, take it with a hand weapon shield, have a really good save, have 2 ranks of models fighting back with strength 4 attacks at AP 1 because they've got those Grommel weapons built in. You know, great stuff there. Or you can just, you know, if you win the fight, maybe you're playing Royal Host, you've got the +1 to your strength, you can follow up, you can swap to the great weapons. You can get some benefits in a way that I think Dwarves play around with very well. They don't have any of the weapons that have been buffed, so in terms of, like, you don't have halberds or anything like that, but that doesn't matter because you're looking to basically use your hand weapon shield and then go to great weapons. Speaking of hand weapon shield, lots of the units do come with shield wall built in. Shield wall, obviously incredible, turns your first fall back in good order into a give ground, so you only move back 2 inches if your opponent follows up. They don't count as charging, they don't get any, you know, they can't use Furious Charge, they can't use lances, they can't do any of these things. So really nice buff to have just sort of natively on a lot of your units, just having shield wall for anything that can have shields, and it gives you a reason to soak a charge with the shields on top of the actual extra save you get from parry. Before we get into the list building, as always, let's have a quick refresh on what you can get from each of the different armies of infamy. So starting off with the Royal Clan, you are limited in terms of your characters. You've got to have at least 1+ King or Thane, but you can have uncapped of those. You can have 0 to 1 Anvil of Doom or Rune Lord per 1,000 points, and you can have uncapped Runesmiths. That's fine. In this list, you don't miss anything that you're actually not able to take there. You're not bothered about taking Engineers or the Slayer characters. I think in general, you're just not bothered about taking the Slayer characters for Dwarves anyway, unfortunately. But that's what you get there. So, core, you can have, you know, it's only 25%, so nice there. Although I think we're probably going to be starting to look quite heavily, maybe towards sort of 50% of your core, especially for Royal Host, Royal Clan, sorry. I think they can do the big bricks of scoring infantry very well. At least 25% of your army points must be spent on Royal Clan Warriors, Longbeards, and Quarrelers. Now, I do like Royal Clan Warriors, but they're a little bit expensive. We'll have a look at their stats in a second. And I kind of wish you could just take normal warriors, which are a lot cheaper. But that's what we get. In terms of special, you can take Hammers and Dwarf Carts, which is just the Bugman's Cart, the one that gives you extra movement. 0 to 3 War Machines, which is the Bolt Thrower and the Grudge Thrower. Obviously, I talked about in the Empire list that this technically supersedes the changes, you know, you're capped at 0 to 3 in special. I don't think anyone's trying to spam War Machines in Dwarves, so I'm not going to belabor the point in this one. Rare, you can take Rangers, Iron Breakers, and Iron Drakes. So I think the only thing here that I'm super in love with is the Iron Drakes. I really like Rangers when they counter scoring, and I don't think I like Iron Breakers all that much. Pardon me. Mercenaries. You can take Imperial Dwarf Mercenaries, Doomseekers, and Goblin Hewers. That's fine. And you can take Thanes or Runesmiths as your BSB. And this is where having the Runesmith in a unit as BSB already giving you that extra magic resist, being able to take those runes that give you, you know, additional ability to dispel is really nice to have. Also, what do we get in terms of special rules? First of all, you get +1 strength on a charge or follow-up move. So it's a charge of 3 inches or more, so that includes a pursuit, or a follow-up move, which means if your opponent gave ground, you still get the +1 to your strength. So you're pretty likely to win combat on combat res, even if you don't kill all that much. And then when you follow up or, you know, charge, well, follow up is ideal because you're still fighting in 2 ranks. But let's say you win, they fall back in good order, and you pursue. You've only got 1 rank of attacks, so swapping to the great weapons with the +1 strength is quite nice to have. Riches and heirlooms, characters can have an additional 25 points on runes, and units that can have standard runes may spend an additional 25 points on standard runes, except for the Royal Clan Warriors who already have this bonus included. Yeah, I maybe wouldn't have bothered including it on there and just made it the same, but either or, doesn't make much difference. Striking a grudge. After deployment, but before the first turn begins, nominate a single enemy character. All friendly units gain the hatred nominated enemy character special rule, and in addition you get a bonus of 75 victory points if the nominated character is slain, fled the battlefield, or is fleeing when the game ends. This is nice. So this is in a world where we were looking at dragon characters. This wasn't super important because obviously the king that was going to be going into him to try and kill it with the smiting, it already hated characters, so that wasn't really an issue. But now if your opponent's got a big Death Star or, you know, something like that, you can just go, oh, I'm going to get an additional couple of attacks into you just with my my normal models with some rerolls in there. So nice to have. The extras of victory points is the bigger part of it in my opinion, but not too upset to see that there. On the other side of the fence, we've got the Expeditionary Force, and this is away from the old classic traditionalist style of dwarves. This is the new, if you're thinking engineers who maybe are a little bit mad and like to like flying war machines and all those bits and pieces. Characters, you can bring 1+ Engineer or Engineer Sapper. We'll talk about the Engineer Sapper in a second as well. Demon Slayers and Dragon Slayers, only 1 total, and then Thanes and Runesmiths. In this case, you can go Core, Warriors, Thunderers, and Dwarf Carts. So this doesn't say that you can't take the Bugman's Cart, so you can just take whichever. 0 to 1 unit of Rangers per 1,000 points, and then Scout Copters can be taken in Core, 0 to 1 unit per 1,000 points. And these are quite nice, but it's hard to get them up to a high enough point to score, and by that I mean they're capped at 1 to 2 models, so you actually can't get them to be a scoring core unit, which means I'm less in love with taking them in general. Special, you can take miners, the additional scout copters and regular copters, 0 to 3 war machines, bolt throwers, growth throwers, cannons, so you can go heavy on these if you want to. Rare, you can go up to 33% of your army on Gyro Bombers, Slayers, and then Organ Guns and Flame Cannons. These are fine. There's nothing in here that I find super exciting, but if you do want to go heavy on it, you can go up to 33% of your points, which is nice. And again, mercenaries, you can take very similar mercenaries here. Imperial Dwarves, Doomseekers, and Goblin Hewers. Finally, Battle Standard Bearers, you can take Engineers in this list as Battle Standard Bearers alongside Thanes, and that's fine. I don't believe this covers Engineer Sappers, unfortunately. If it did, I'd be a lot more excited. I don't think General Engineers are something I'm super bothered about in terms of having as a battle standard bearer. In terms of special rules, there are some nice rules in here. Expeditionary Marksman, 0 to 1 unit of Thunderers per 1,000 points, so 2 at 2,000. Can be Marksman for +1 pointer model. They do not suffer any negative to hit modifiers for moving and shooting. In addition, you can upgrade Engineers to Expeditionary Marksman for +10 points. So this means that you don't also take the additional penalty that handguns have to take from... I always get these confused, Cumbersome or the other one. Anyway, so because you don't take any hit modifiers for moving and shooting, you don't take any hit modifiers at all in terms of your moving and shooting. So you don't stack the 2 modifiers. So you can move Thunderers and shoot without penalty, which is really nice there. And I think it's worth taking. I do like Thunderers in this detachment. Function of the form, you can take cannons, organ guns, and flame cannons at -1 toughness, but they're able to move and still shoot, which is fine. I think organ guns are the one that I'm more leaning towards if I want to go down this route, but I'm not seeing a lot of organ guns for dwarves anyway. Only getting 2 artillery dice worth of shots makes them a little bit harder to justify taking. Finally, you've got the subterranean ambush special rule. So if you've got miners, you can put down 2 mine markers plus 1 additional for each additional unit. So if you've got 2 units, you put down 2. If you've got 1 unit, you put down 2 markers. If you've got 2 units, you put down 3. Yada yada. You can put them anywhere apart from enemy units' deployment zone, within range of a friendly mine marker, 12 inches, within 6 inches of an enemy unit, or 3 inches of a special feature or objective marker. And when they come in, they can be placed anywhere on the battlefield within 6 inches of a mine marker, but not within 6 inches of an enemy unit. Can't charge. It basically comes in as if it's come from reserves, but it doesn't say that it can't march here. So anyway, this gives you a reasonable amount of flexibility. What is this good for? This is good for sniping out enemy baggage wagons, or baggage trains, I should say, because your opponent's going to put it into their deployment zone. But you can put your marker just outside of their deployment zone, and if they don't hold it, or if they're holding it in the wrong place, you can come in within 6 inches of that mine marker, and then you can still move. So you can theoretically be touching that baggage train the turn you come down, making it very difficult for your opponent to interact with you. So I do like this as a rule, and I think I probably will be putting multiple units into my army for this. It's just a little bit of a shame that you can't take miners in core. That would be fantastic. It would make a really big difference in how the army plays. But I still like a couple of small units of miners in this detachment, I think. Lastly, before we move on to the actual building, I did say that I would talk about the actual the models that you can bring. So the Engineer Sappers, they've got a special rule here, Dig In. So they can do a leadership test in the command subphase if not in combat, and if passed, the character and unit becomes entrenched. They're considered to be behind partial cover and to be defending a low linear obstacle. Should it move, it is no longer entrenched. Now, this hasn't been clarified. However, and I've had lots of people telling me this is how it works. I haven't looked into it deeply. So if you're going to an event, or if you're playing this army versus friends, maybe just double check with them to make sure you're on the same page. But given how the FAQ has worded and clarified earthen ramparts, I have been told and people fervently believe this means that you are effectively behind a low linear obstacle in terms of you no longer are on the receiving end of stomps, you don't take impact hits, your opponent can only hit you with one attack. So that's a really big buff, and it's definitely worth putting in. It is a leadership test, but you're leadership 9, and it's only 70 points. So assuming that is how that works, that's a very strong buff to have. Hostile terrain, enemy units that move, and the command... End movement within command range must take dangerous terrain tests. This would be better if they just made a range of terrain, even if it's just difficult terrain, but you're not going to be upset if your opponent loses a couple of models, and now that people are bringing bigger units and potentially are coming towards you, maybe charging, if an enemy unit of 30 infantry charges your unit that has an engineer sapper in, not only does it have the defenses here from dig in, they have to take a whole lot of dangerous terrain tests, and in a 30 model unit, theoretically 5 of them die. That's already getting them much closer to losing some sort of, infantry rank bonus, all of those things there. So a couple of nice buffs here if you're going for sort of a bit of a gun line that's also doubling down as a sort of brick wall for your opponent to charge towards. Looking at Royal Clan Warriors, these are exactly the same as regular warriors in terms of stat line, with a couple of differences. So everything up here is absolutely the same. And then special rule-wise, Royal Clan Warriors have Grommel Armor, giving them reroll 1s of failed armor saves, and Grommel Weapons, giving them AP 1 on their hand weapons. So these are 2 really nice buffs to have. They can also buy Drilled, Stubborn, and Veteran, which you can also do for regular warriors. So it's mostly the difference there in terms of you've got those special rules built in, you've got Grommel Armor, you've got Grommel Weapons, which is really nice, but you are paying 2 extra points for the privilege. However, there is a real downside, and something that makes me less excited to play Royal Clan Warriors than regular warriors, and that is, while you do get a really great weapon, strength +2, AP -3, which is, just better than a regular great weapon, you have to replace your shields with it, and that's a really big downside now, because you might want to soak a charge with a 3-up armor save. Royal Clan Warriors can't do that and also take, the Grommel Great Axes that are so good, so you really are paying for the privilege of having a difference there. I think in that mind, I'm more likely to look at Longbeards within the Royal Clans list, but it is a unit that you can take, and maybe you just look at taking them in terms of going hand weapon shield, Grommel Armor, Grommel Weapons, because they are a little bit tankier than Longbeards. They do just have the downside of being strength 3 instead of strength 4. So some trade-offs there. 2 points cheaper than Longbeards, but then you have to pay extra for some rules. They're a little bit of a weird middling unit, and I liked them more before the infantry changes that came in, I think. Just a very quick final note, you can take Imperial Dwarf Mercenaries as well. These are basically the normal stat line of a Dwarf Warrior, Thunderer, Quarreler, any of those. It comes equipped with light armor, but you can pay to give them heavy armor, and they do come with Shield Wall, which normal Thunderers and Quarrelers don't have. So if you want one of those units, but also want to have it have Shield Wall and have, more option here in terms of what they can be equipped with, this is the way to do so. However, keep in mind, they're not a core unit, so they're not going to be scoring. I believe the way mercenaries work is they're not core, it's just a mercenary unit. Doesn't count for your scoring. So you can take these models. I think there is less reason to take them than there was before, and I don't think people were taking them previously. If we start off with the list building, I think if you're going for a sort of very classic, just full rank and flank, melee only or mostly melee only list, Royal Clan is the best way to do it. Obviously, you've got more characters available to you. You've also got the ability to take, you can take the Royal Clan Warriors. I'm probably just looking at Longbeards, but you can take more Longbeards than you can take elsewhere. And you're more likely to be taking buffed up characters. You've got more points to do so. So, what are we thinking in terms of the actual Royal Clan list? Well, I think the place to start always is taking a battle standard bearer that's going to make things really solid. So in this case, we're probably looking at a runesmith, because the runesmith does give you magic resist 2 and it gives you a dispel threat. Full plate here, shield. We can give them a great weapon. I think we just want to stay as tanky as possible, so we're not going to bother doing that. Makes it less likely that we pick the wrong weapon and accidentally get sniped. And then in terms of the banner runes, I really like the Master Rune of Grungni. This is just a classic for any dwarf standard bearer. Gives the unit a 5-up ward, and in addition, friendly units within 6 inches have a 6-up ward against shooting. So just solid to give you a bit more defense against incoming firepower, and also make one unit a real tanky beast. Going to combo that with the Rune of Battle, and I do like having just a Rune of Courage on my important unit. So going to be taking that on anything that's anywhere approaching a Death Star or bunkering loads of expensive characters. Then what sort of units are we looking at in terms of putting them in? We're probably going to be going a couple of units of Longbeard, so let's start off with full command here. I like a Rune of Battle. I think that's just a solid place to start, and I do like the great weapons and shields. You can go drilled. I'm on the fence about drilled. I think it's fine. I don't typically take it all that often, to be honest. I find that I don't get a lot of value out of it, so probably not taking drilled here. If you want to, you can, but I'm also not looking at taking an anvil, so I'm not going to be doing the Richer Yeet, as it is called. So let's go with something like 24 models here. We don't have to go for the big full 500-point unit, because we're going to be going for a couple of units here to maybe play a couple of objective points, make it hard for opponent to get as many points as possible. So let's just say we've got here Rune of Battle, and we'll also give this unit Rune of the Passage. Rune of Passage, really important. Move through cover is such a pain, given the way that this works, and this is a rule that I discovered people still are getting wrong. When you move through cover, you minus it from your movement stat, and then you double it for your marching. So if you're in combat, if you're in terrain, you go down to a 2-inch move, and then you march 4 inches. So really punishing for longbirds or just dwarves in general. Make sure that any of your important units, Rune of Passage, is in there if you can fit it. So something like this is a default, and we can just double up. We can go for a second one of these. And remember, you can't have the same rune loadouts on any of your items. So here, I still want to take Rune of Passage. We're just also going to give this unit champion Rune of the Furnace, because it's the cheapest way that you can get it to be a little bit, still get the same thing, but have another bonus. In this case, Rune of Battle, and we're going to give this unit Rune of Courage as well. Why are we doing this? Well, the Runesmith's going to join the unit without the Rune of Courage, and Rune of Courage here just gives us the defensive ability again. So we've spent 1,000 points already. We've got 2 big combat bricks, loads of combat res in there, and just generally going to be hard to interact with. This sort of army benefits really well from a really killy king. So I like going a king, give them a shield, don't need a shield, sorry. Give them shield bearers and a great weapon as well. In terms of output, we're going to go Rune of Smiting. This is an absolute classic. I've been on the receiving end of this multiple times, and this gives your opponent, or it gives you multiple wounds d6 on your great weapon. So, unfortunately, kings are still only strength 4, which feels a little bit odd to me. But your high weapon skill, your strength 6 with a great weapon, you're doing d6 damage every wound that goes through, which is really nice to do. And given the change to regen, it's much harder for people to accidentally blank that 6 damage that you did to them. You combo that with the Master Rune of Gromril. This gives you a 2-up armor save, so you don't need to use the thing there. And also, you've got a 5-up ward save because you're going to be joining the Runesmith, but I don't hate giving them a Rune of Passage, Rune of the Furnace as well. Have we given anyone Rune of the Furnace on their own? No, I don't believe we have. So Rune of the Furnace, it doesn't come up all that often, but for 5 points, gives you a 3-up ward save against flaming attacks. Obviously, you have still got quite a lot of points here, so if you wanted to, you could go for a Rune of Fury, get another rune in there, but I think it's most important that you go for the Rune of Preservation. This gives you immunity to killing them on multiple wounds, which means that it's basically impossible for someone to kill you because you're going to be super tanky. You've got 3 wounds base here, your toughness 5, you're also on top of the shield bearers, which gives you an additional 3 wounds. You've got 6 wounds, you've got a 2-up armor save, you've got a 5-up ward save, you've got a weapon that can kill gods. This is a great place to start in terms of just bringing something that can threaten the opponent. Now, we have got 2 units of Longbeards, and this unit here is the one that's got both of the characters in as well. In terms of filling out the rest of the list, obviously we do need 3 non-character units, and I think this style of list plays really well without giving up, good, easy access to points that are hard to defend. So I don't want to go too small units, but I do like some range support. So I could see something like a couple of units of Iron Drakes, let's say 10 strong with Iron Warden champions, still just with the Drake gun and the Cinder Blast bombs. Why do I think the Drake guns are so good? Well, they're Strength 5, AP 1, Armor Bane 2. They've got Dwarf Crafted, which means you don't take a -1 for stand and shoot. Really strong, very hard to actually get round. Quick Shot, which means you don't take -1 for moving and shooting, and you can always stand and shoot. And you stack on top of them the Cinder Blast bombs, which is a Strength 5, AP 1, Quick Shot, but each time you hit with the Cinder Blast Bomb, which is just for the unit champion, they take d6 plus 1 hits instead of just 1. So less Armor Bane, but you get a lot more hits if you actually do get the hits there. So they're a really hard unit to charge. They've got a good amount of damage at range. They've got good ballistic skill. If you look at them here, they start off with ballistic skill 4 and 5, but they're not taking much in terms of penalties. The only penalty they're taking are regular cover saves and long range, because it's only an 18 range gun. So you're going to be hitting on 4s most of the time. When your opponent's charging you, you're going to be hitting on 3s. Really nice sort of ranged output, and they can sit either, you can go 10 wide, or you can go 2x5, sit on a hill. Plenty of flexibility there. Go a little bit wider, sit in terrain, lots of flexibility, and this gives you some range pressure that you want to move up with the rest of the units, but doesn't have to be quite so far on the front lines, or if your opponent comes towards you to try and get points out of you, they're very happy to stand and shoot and do a lot of combat res that way. So maybe a couple of the units of those is a good place to start, and I definitely want some sort of support for this unit of Longbeards here. One unit Longbeards obviously has the Battle Standard Bearer and the King in, but I do want something to make sure that the second unit isn't just an absolute pushover. It's a lot harder to build a second character that does that, so something along the lines of Great Weapon, Shield Bearers, Shield. I don't think we're going to end up using the Shield, actually, because I do have an idea for this one. And this is maybe where we look at putting in the Master Rune of Adamant. So this gets you to Toughness 10, which is ridiculous. Toughness 10 now means, obviously with poison having changed, a poison weapon can't wound you if you're Toughness 10. They still have to be able to wound you on the chart to get the +2 to wound you. So in this case, you are immune to anything outside of, I think, Strength 4 and below. I'd have to double check that, but most of the time people are going to be wounding you on 6s if they can wound you at all. That's the main thing to remember. We've also got a great weapon, and we do have a shield, but we've got 25 points left, which is exactly enough for a Rune of Fury. So you can have this character here with 5 attacks with a great weapon, good weapon skill, doing a decent amount of output, but also being almost impossible to kill. So you can soak dragons with this character. You can't necessarily soak the, Baron with the killing blow, but that's why you've got unit champions to throw into. And this chap can just absolutely make sure that everything else bounces off him and do a lot of wounds to the Pegasus Knights that the enemy Baron or Duke is with. So I think this is a solid second character output. You could also go more in terms of just trying to make it a real good unit in terms of output. There's a lot of stuff in terms of the Master Runes. The reason we haven't gone for a second Master Rune of Smiting is you can only take one Master Rune. So you could go with something like a hand weapon here with this. So you could get the hand weapon shield bonus to get yourself up to a 3-up armor save there. And then you combine it with something like a couple of runes of might, maybe some, runes of... Is it cleaving that gives you extra AP? Yeah, there's some combinations that you can do there, but I think the easy option to go for is just make it Toughness 10. You're never going to die. We've got a shield just in case somehow you're going to be taking a lot of wounds, and we've got 5 attacks with our great weapon. And I think this is a solid starting point for a Royal Clans list. On the other side of the coin, we've got Expeditionary Force. I think we still want to go a lot of core, and that's going to be the theme here for a lot of the armies. Grand Army, we're going to go a little bit more all-rounded, and remember, these are not designed to be, this is the meta list. These are just sort of pointing you in the right direction to how you might want to build. There's the Bursting Rune Thane, who, in fact, let me just show you all what the Bursting Rune Thane is. If you haven't come across this before, you should definitely know about it. Crossbow or handgun. I prefer handgun, but crossbow works as well. You give them the Master Rune of Bursting Flame. This gives you, every time you hit, you get 2d3 auto hits instead of 1. You give them the Rune of Accuracy, so you always hit on your weapon, your ballistic skill, so you don't take any negative modifiers. That means moving, cover, skirmish, all of these things. And then you also go Rune of Rapid Fire, multiple shots 2, and quick shots. So you can always stand and shoot, and you get 2 shots. You're a Thane, so you're hitting on 3s with your ballistic skill 4, never taking any penalties, and each time you hit, your opponent takes 2d3 hits. This is equivalent, really, to a unit of Thunderers. So this is just worth having in any list. You could absolutely put this into your Royal Clans list, tweak around the points, maybe take a few less Longbeards, maybe don't give the second king quite as beefy a loadout. Get some combat res through having the Thane in there for the stand and shoot. There's a lot of stuff you can do. But I want to try and give examples of different styles of list. However, this Thane absolutely makes it into the Expeditionary Force. So we've got the Thane, and again, normally, or prior to 1.5, I'd give this model the Rune of the Furnace, because the main counter to it was Pillar of Fire. I don't think that's a problem anymore, so we can probably skimp on points there. We do need engineers and engineer sappers or Burlock Davidson. Burlock Davidson is really solid, so he's got a few rules in here that are really solid that you want to be aware of. You've got prepared positions, so this is entrenching a unit of War Machines and Quarrelers or Thunderers and giving them the bonus, the low linear obstacle. So if you want to go for Death Star, this does what the engineer sapper does, but at the start of the turn, and you can put it on the Thunderers/Quarrelers, whereas normally you'd only be able to put it on the War Machines from the regular engineers. You've also got range-finding optics. This is a really nice one. So Quarrelers, Thunderers, or War Machines within command range can reroll rolls of hit of 1 or reroll a single artillery dice. Really good stuff there. And Burlock and any unit he's joined do not suffer -1 to hit when shooting at long range. So you can pick one unit to get some buffs, and you can also you ignore the long range penalties for the unit that you're in. This is really nice, and you probably want to put him in ranges. I know he doesn't get the rerolls, but they have a better ballistic skill anyway. He really benefits from being in a unit of ranges. Also, he's got a decent leadership, leadership 10 there. Can't get much better than that. He does have a funny weapon. The rivet gun is fine. It's strength 3, AP 2, armor bane 1, and you do D3 hits. If you hit, it's fine. It's not super exciting. And then he has the lottery casino furnace hammer. Strength is artillery dice, and if you roll a misfire, you lose a single wound. I've never done wounds to anyone other than myself with this. He doesn't make it into combat all that often, but I actively dislike this in terms of consistency. But it is very funny, so do make sure that you're making full use of that if you put it into your list. Anyway, so we've got the Burlock Damanson General, we've got the Thane Bursting Rune there, and we probably want to put a couple of Engineer Sappers in so they can do the bunkering, make sure that our units are safe. So how are we going to load them out? We probably don't need to do too much. We can give them Great Weapon Handgun as well. Is there anything that we really want to put onto here? I don't think there's anything that I think they can be pretty cheap. You might want to buff them up so that they're less likely to fall over, but we'll leave them like this for now. So in fact, let's go one Engineer Sapper, and we've got Burlock to give another one of our units the ability just to not, start in the defensive positions, and we'll come back and maybe add another Sapper down the line. Core, I do like a unit of Rangers, so we're going to go full command here. We also give them Rune of Battle, nice to have. We're going to give them the full loadout, crossbows, throwing axes, and great weapons and shields. It does make them very expensive, but they're such a good versatile unit. They get that 3-up save in combat. They get to stand and shoot with the crossbows. If you're too close, they get to stand and shoot with the throwing axes, which are worse. But you have quick shot on there, and it's strength 4, strength 4, sorry. Also, you can move and shoot these instead of, you've got the crossbows that will be hitting on 5s because you moved and shoot. So you got a lot of flexibility with this unit. They've got a decent amount of combat res. They are open order here, or skirmish, so you don't get the close order bonus, but you've got a standard bearer with Rune of Battle, so it's like having a war banner effectively, and you've got, obviously, you can go ranks if you want to play them as you wish. I'm going to start off with let's start off with 24, and we might drop down from there. And we can take 0 to 1 units of Rangers per 1,000 points. I really like these. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to take another unit because I think the Thunderers/Quarrelers do such a good job in this list. You can go for something like, let's say, a unit of 18 Thunderers, give them full command, give them great weapon shields and expeditionary marksmen. They can't take any runes, so they're kind of just capped as they are, but for 267 points, you've got a unit that can be entrenched, so they're effectively defending a low lane or obstacle. They've got a pretty decent stand and shoot. They can move and shoot if they need to. The sapper can every turn put them into their I keep forgetting the name of it, the low lane or obstacle, so they can be defended. I think this is just a really solid core unit that scores quite well and gives you a decent amount of combat res on the run-in, and they can swap to great weapons if they need to. So, like that here as an option. You could also take a brace of pistols on the veteran, but I think that's not necessarily worth the points. Other than that, how do we want to round out this list? So you can take organ guns and flame cannons here. I don't love them all that much. Special units, I do like taking cannons. I know cannons are worse, and grudge throwers are not seeing too much play, but I quite like them in terms of having the ability to put some more ranged pressure on. And also miners. So miners are really good in terms of dealing with your opponent's baggage carts or just trying to be a pain in the backside. So I don't feel the need to go up to 10, but something like 8 just means that you're not going to, even if you take a couple of wounds, you're still likely to be able to get through and destroy that baggage train if we're talking about comboing this with the ability that you get in the detachment where you can put down the mine markers, you can come in from reserve, and you can just start moving and getting in. How do we want to do it? Well, I think we probably want to go open order. We can take 2 units that can take open order per 1,000 points, or 1 per 1,000 points, I should say. Blasting charges are nice but expensive, and they're not that great. So we're probably just going to look at keeping them the same and put a unit champion in there. Just always nice in terms of being able to avoid challenges or get into a challenge and make it so the rest of the unit survives. And if you give them a steam drill, it gives you a reroll to come in from reserves. So I think that's worth the points. 26 points here for a lot of consistency. We're going to start off with 2 units of miners here, because I think they do really well at being a pain in the backside. You can also bring them in and do some, the next turn flank or rear charges. They're just a nice unit to have in terms of mission play, and also being a bit of a pain in the backside for your opponent. On top of that, what are we looking to fit in? So we've got the Thane that does some good range damage. We've got both defensive for both of our units here. We probably want some war machines, and this is where it really comes down to flavour. So you can absolutely put organ guns and flame cannons in. I think I'm just going to look at more the cannons and grudge throwers. So maybe let's start off with 2 and 2 of each. Now, you definitely want to give all of your war machines some sort of rune if you can, but remember you can't have the same rune combination. So one of them is going to have the rune of reloading, which is great. It can shoot every turn even if it misfired and malfunctioned. And then the next one is going to have the rune of forging alone. So that gives you reroll a single misfire on the artillery dice. Then let's go a couple of cannons as well. And because we can't just go for the same rune combination, one will have the rune of reloading and the stalwart rune. So this gives you +1 combat res in combat. You don't care about that. It's just so you can take the rune of reloading pretty cheaply. And then the other cannon is... Oh, yeah, I haven't put a second cannon in. Going to go rune of forging and rune of reloading. And this is sort of just like a standard 4 war machine loadout. If I'm going for war machines, one gets reloading, one gets forging and reloading, one gets reloading and stalwart, just because it's cheap. Why do we want to go for magic for the runes here? A couple of reasons. It gives you consistency. You don't have to have them near engineer, so we will put an engineer in here for some rerolls, but it lets you be a little bit more spread out, makes it harder for people to catch you. You don't have to bunker up as much. You can be a bit more spread out, so that if they do have a dragon that goes around hunting your war machines, they're never going to be able to get, turn 3 they get one of them, turn 4 they are facing the wrong way or they're not able to catch you, so turn 5 they get the second one. Really limit their ability to squeak out your points there. But also it gives you magical attacks, and that means this is an army that actually doesn't suffer that much against something like vampire counts when they've got loads of ethereal. You can just gun them down. You can drop a cannonball on the head of a banshee. It's a little bit hard to do with character protection, but you've got some tools here to deal with ethereal with your magical attacks. Also, if you ever play against Trollhorde, you turn off their rerolls on their regen saves, which is really nice to have as well. Sorry, Trollhorde players, all 6 of you. This is specifically designed to beat you. What else do we want to put in here? So we've got some flexibility, we've got some range, we've got some 2 range units here that are bringing both combat res, but also the ability to do damage at range there. We probably want, and by probably, we definitely want a battle standard bearer. So I really like just the same, the loadout we've got here. We're going to go for the Master Rune of Grugni, giving the unit a ward save, also giving a 6-up ward against shooting to friendly units within 6. This is quite key because it's the sort of list that will get into protected ranged combats. And then again, we're just going to give it Rune of Battle, Rune of Courage. In terms of runes, we can't put Rune of Courage on the Thunderers. I think that's okay because I think it's a cheaper unit. I'm less worried about losing it to Terra. They are going to be in range of Burlock Damonson with his leadership 10, so there is a world that we lose this and the Engineer Sapper, but it's less likely to happen, I think, than anywhere else. So we're just going to go with this Engineer here, and we'll give them a great weapon. They can have a handgun as well. I don't think it's worth paying the extra points for the Expeditionary Marksman unless you give them some additional output here. We could go Accuracy and Rapid Fire and then Expeditionary Marksman, but that does put us up to quite an expensive unit. I just don't know that it's worth the additional. You know what, we're going to do it. Just gives us a little bit more protection against the ranged output, the ethereal things that might be causing us issues. Because putting magic runes on units gives them magical attacks. We do finally have 91 points left to spend. Is there anything else that we could put in that would make us happy? I don't hate... Let me have a look here. Let's go... Tell you what, let's go 1 unit of 2 copters. I think two copters... They're unit strength 3 each, that gets you to unit strength 6. They're another unit that can go out and threaten to get something like dealing with enemy baggage trains or just flying around. They've got pretty decent ballistic skill. They're coming in at ballistic skill 4. They've got the clatter guns, which are pretty solid. Strength 4, AP 1, multiple shots D6, all of these special rules. So having this just as a flanking unit to potentially hit an enemy unit in the flank, turn off their... disrupt them, turn off their rank bonuses. Lots of good stuff you can do with a couple of copters there. And to get under the points, we're just going to drop, let's say, 1 ranger, 2 rangers, down to 22, and that gets us comfortably there. So, quick recap, Burlock Damonson General, Engineer Sapper just to sit inside of the unit of Thunderers to give them their buffs. Engineer with the full loadout BSB, and then we've also given them the extra shooting. The Bursting Flame, Accuracy, Rapid Fire Thane, so you've got a good suite of characters there. 22 Rangers fully kitted out, 18 Thunderers fully kitted out, 2 Scout Copters, a couple of units of Miners, and these are more of a cute choice. You can absolutely drop them, but I think they work pretty well in this sort of style. 2 Grudge Throwers, 2 Cannons, all equipped with magic runes. Last but not least, what are we looking at for Dwarven Mountain Hold's Grand Army? And I think it's difficult to find an identity for this that isn't just sort of overlapping with the other two. So we can very quickly just sort of flick through and go here. We've got, you know, the Great Weapon, the Shield Bearers, we've got the Master Rune of Smiting, we've got the Master Rune of Grommel. We don't get to take the Rune of Preservation as well. So it's a hard choice. I think I like the 2-up save more than the immunity to Killing Blow, because you can always challenge out someone who's got Killing Blow, or you can try to anyway. So I think that's absolutely fine there. We're going to go for the Thane BSB. Given that we're going for a Thane, I like having this character on the Shield Bearers. Giving them more wounds just gives them a bit more reliability. And again, we'll go Grunkney, we'll go Rune of Battle, Rune of Courage, Great Weapon, Shield, and then here, we don't need much on this character. We could give this character the Rune of Preservation, because we haven't been able to fit it on the King. It means that we could challenge out, for example, the Killing Blow Bretonnian Lord, soak it, take not that much damage, and just be very difficult to deal with. I think that's absolutely fine. We can also, we've already got a ward save here. There's probably not anything else I'm super in love with going. You could give them extra wounds, but that's not super worthwhile. We could give them plus toughness. It's fine. I don't think we need to spend points on it here, but I will put Rune of the Passage on this model. Again, just talked about, we really don't want units to be stuck in combat if avoidable, stuck in terrain if avoidable. Finally, we're going to put the Bursting Rune Thane in here. So let's go Handgun, Shield. Can you have a Great Weapon as well? Handgun there. Also, let's go with all of the stuff we know. Bursting Flame, Accuracy, Rapid Fire. Just good. Going to do loads of damage at range, good to have, and this King has to be the general as well. Into the core units, you can take 1 unit of Longbeards and 1 unit of Rangers, so that's what we're going to do. I think that's a good place to start. So let's start with 24 here. Full command, I'd like a Rune of Battle and a... we could go for Vanguard. Obviously, Vanguard is nerfed. Now that it's been changed, you can't charge after you Vanguard, which does mean if someone full sends towards us after we Vanguarded, we are in a little bit of difficulty. I don't love doing that here. So I think we're just going to go for a plain Rune of Battle on this one and go for Great Weapons, Shields, and again, I've talked about I'm not a huge fan of Drilled, but you can take it if you want to. Then we could also go for a unit of Rangers, so this is very similar. You're just going to do, let's say, start 24, and we can always take these down. We can't go Rune of Battle, because we've already got one that's got the Rune of Battle and nothing else, so we're just going to put Rune of Courage on there, make sure both of our big units are immune to Fear and Terror tests, really important to have. Go for the full loadout, Great Weapon, Shields, Crossbows, Throwing Axes, all of the good stuff there. And that leaves us with about 500 points to fill out the rest. And I think I'd like some more ranged pressure and some enemy anti-scoring. So, Copters. I don't think we can take the Scout Copters in this detachment, unless I am incorrect. No, I'm pretty sure you can't. No, not at all. All right, so a unit of 2 Copters here. Again, like we were talking about, the Scout Copters, they do the, you know, they can flank. They've got unit strength 5, so they can disrupt enemy units. They've got decent shooting, not as good. We're not going to bother paying for the clatter guns because we've only got ballistic skill 3, so we're just going to stick with the steam guns, which is a template. Templates, not great at the moment, but given that people are bringing more ranked up units, they are a little bit better here. They are also tankier, so you can do, you know, dive bomb, fire and flee. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Not that you can fire and flee a template, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, we've got them for enemy anti-scoring, getting rid of their baggage train, or just being a faff to deal with, and that still leaves us with 360 points. And I think this is where we probably look at putting in something like a couple of, maybe units of 8 Iron Drakes. Something along these lines here, where we're going 8 with the Cinder Blast Bombs, and that leaves us with 80 points here. This is where you could put a couple of War Machines in. I don't love 2 War Machines. I think if I'm going War Machines, I want to go pretty heavy on them. So maybe we just go for a Bugman's Cart, because these units probably want the ability to move forwards and have a bit more flexibility. And it also does give us another, not scoring unit, but like a little cheap chaff piece that you can put down early, or as you fancy. So something like a Dwarf Cart there, and then maybe just go one more model to round this out. I don't think anything here is 13 points, unfortunately. What if we went... give both of these units musicians? Something like that. Again, as always, this isn't intended to be the out-and-out, this is how you play Dwarves, it's the only way, but I want to give you some starting thoughts for how you might want to build the different armies of infamy, the Arcane Journal armies, the regular Grand Army, all of that stuff if you're looking to put a Dwarf army on the tabletop, especially if you haven't played them, maybe since the start of the edition, or you're wanting to get into the faction new from the off. Thank you for watching, thank you for getting to the end of the video. If you've reached this point and you haven't already, I would really appreciate a like, a comment, a subscription if you haven't done those things. It just helps me get seen by more people, boost me up in the algorithm, all of the stuff that the YouTubers do like to say. If you would like to support me in my goal to become a full-time YouTuber, I would absolutely appreciate that. You can become a member below. There are various perks to those, name at the end of the videos, all that good stuff, but it also unlocks some VIP areas in Discord if you become a Longbeard or Ground Knight tier supporter. Those VIP sections are the only parts that are locked away in Discord. You don't have to be a member to join the Discord. I'd recommend that you should. We've got about 450, 500 people on there. It's a great place for discussion, a lot of fun. I do try and chime in as much as possible. And it's also where the Fix My List show lists are put, and also if you are one of the Ground Knight or Longbeard tier supporters, where you participate in choosing which list I play in the monthly Pick My List series.